are expected, and those basically have been part of why the talks stalled yesterday between IEBC, NASA, and Jubilee, with NASA saying that some of those amendments are sinister, but Jubilee standing firm and saying that they are necessary for the elections to be upheld so that we do not have ourselves back to where we are now. Let me quickly introduce the guests that we have this morning. We have Honorable Chris Omalwa and nominated Senator Isaac Mwaura. And also a quick reminder that you're welcome to participate in the conversation. This is the State of the Nation. And, well, you can do that via Twitter. And the Twitter handle is, well, at KTN News. Or you can also tweet me directly. And that's at Michael G. Gitonga. The hashtag is Morning Express KTN. We'll also open up the phone lines to hear what you have to say. But before we go to some of the other questions that are being raised by both Jubilee and NASA, I want to hear with from what our panelists have to say this morning. We're going to go to other issues that are being raised by Jubilee and NASA. But let me first of all hear from you, Honorable Mwaura, why you find it necessary to have these amendments done now. And some of them, like the electronic and manual transmission of results, which is basically taking us back to where we were as a country. These amendments had been done previously and by the Joint Parliamentary Committee. And this seems like we're being taken back to where we were in the beginning.
I think first I want to really get surprised by the way Patrick Amimo has analyzed this context. Very biased, a very biased way.
Why do you say it's biased?
But of course it is. You know, when you are giving reasons and measures, do not be seen to be leaning to a certain political side. I think for me, I could hear him almost advancing the NASA narrative, and that's my opinion. The issue I want to say is that there are challenges around the interpretation of the law. And this is very clear in terms of even the Supreme Court and the ruling that was made. If you look at Section 83, the issue of and or, it was very clear that it had an issue. It was interpreted quite variantly by both the so-called majority ruling versus a dissenting minority, which I agree with. If you look also at Section 44A. And if you look at the whole issue where we find ourselves into, Mike, is because of the minor care issues. And, you know, when you have a problem with the transmission, which can happen, there's no technology that is perfect. The best way is to go back to the actual physical content, physical ballot, physical form. And I don't think it should be in dispute, not unless you want to say that you would want to raise grounds purely on the basis of transmission. And even if you are to talk about the process, then you have to ensure that what is physically available must be looked at before you can nullify an election. Did people cast their votes, Mike, in the last general election? You and I, and I'm sure my brother Chris here, we queued to vote. What happened to those papers? What happened to that exercise of our right? But we have a situation where we are being told that it has to be electronic. And even a country like Germany, they've just come from having their fourth election under Angela Merkel, and it is manual. And people seem to confuse that our election system is not electronic. It is actually manual.
Okay. Let me pause you there and hear from Honorable Chris Omalwa. Sounds like a reasonable, genuine reason to go back to manual when the electronic fails. After all, when we queue and you tick on the box, that is manual. And at the end of the day, the vote that you cast, the vote that I cast, is put into a box manually. So if the electronic fails, why not go back to count the manual?
Thank you. One thing I want to say is that it is very, very unfortunate for Jubilee to take us back to the dark old days. There's a report, Crickler report, and Crickler gave a very comprehensive report after looking and analyzing at all the processes involved as far as matters of elections are concerned. And I have a lot of respect for my friend Senator Mwaura. Normally, he's been very objective in his evaluation, analysis. But since the time he was nominated by Jubilee, I don't know what happened. And I'm very sorry to say that, because he's been one of the good, very objective debaters when with him in National Assembly. But whatever happened, I don't know. Now, why you are saying that we are going back to the dark days, and by the way, German and Kenya are totally different in terms of honesty, in terms of the rule of law, integrity is totally different. So we can't compare Kenya and German. The two are like dark day and night. Now, coming back to whatever the amendments are, I think yesterday I was on the floor of the House, and we really opposed those things, because like today in Parliament, they've introduced a new session, which is allowed in line with the standing orders. And you can only bring in a session if at all there are some critical matters or urgent matters to be handled. And from our side, we opposed. We went for a division, and we even walked out, because we don't want to be part of this. First, when you say you want to go back to the manual aspect of voter identification, remember we had the issue of the green book, the black book. It was very difficult to clean the voter register. And last Parliament, we had both sides of Jubilee and the sides of NASA, where we had a parliamentary joint committee, which was chaired by Orengo and now the current governor of Meru, Kiraitu. There are so many gains. Everything was agreed. And I always say, I want to borrow the words of Martin Luther King Jr. when he said, we must learn to live together as brothers or perish together as fools. And I want Jubilee to know that NASA is not going anywhere. We are here, and we must learn to live together or we perish together. Live together in terms of passing legislation which will add value as far as the common good is concerned. When you look at Section 44A of the Elections Act, first and foremost, that aspect of complementary, we were totally opposed as NASA, because it was even against the decision that was made by the committee of Kiraitu and Orengo. But because they had tyranny of numbers, they brought it in. But what they are trying to put across now, they want us to go to the manual system. And I don't want us to be confusing the Maina Kiaye, the ruling at the Court of Appeal, because the gist of that ruling was that the results that will be announced at the constituency level should not be altered, should be final, and it should be the same results that are going to be reflected at the tallying center, if that's in Bomas. I want to take you back. One of the judges during the Supreme Court hearing of the presidential petition asked the lawyer for IBC, and this was Nyamodi, that the results that we are seeing being transmitted on TV, what were they? The assumption were these are the results, and they are coming from the constituency, and they are reflecting that Court of Appeal ruling of the Maina Kiai. Do you know what he said? That no, those were not results. Those were his words, statistics or data. This is to tell you we had a big problem as far as the transmission of the results are concerned. It seems these results were being transferred somewhere. They were being altered, and after the alterations, that was what was being transmitted on TV. The electronic system is the best way forward, as per the Crickler report. And the Crickler report was very clear. Kenyans spent so much money. This task force went round, and they gave the recommendations that the best way to go was to go electronically. And why it is important to go the BVR, the biometric voter, the identification before you go vote, is to eliminate the ghost voters. Remember in his report, we had millions of people who had died who are coming back from Langata Cemetery to vote, and they go back to the cemetery. We don't want to go there. So by us having these biometric identifications was to ensure that the genuine voter is identified and is the one to vote.
All right. Honorable Mwaura, why do we need to go back to manual when we already have a Kriegler report that already gives us direction? We have a parliamentary joint committee, and the reason why the parliamentary joint committee came with this was an agreement now between all and sundry for the better of this country. It seems, or there are some who feel like the amendments are not for posterity. They're mainly to benefit Jubilee for this time, but not for posterity.
I think, first and foremost, it is quite unfortunate for one Chris Wamalwa to give himself the, the latitude to have something called objectonometer, which determines how objective one is, depending on whether you're on the same side of the political divide. I think he's on record here saying I used to be objective only because I was on his side of the political divide, and I differ with him because I realized that that was our personality cult, where individuals are only right if they agree with Raila Odinga, and I don't think that is the case. We have different opinions, and that should be always what is considered.
All right.
It's very hypocritical that we are here discussing about Kriegler report, when the Kriegler report clearly said we should have a commission in place so many months before elections.
Actually, 24 months.
And who went to the streets, Mike, to demand the removal of the commissioners? Who would have been retiring this year, November? These are the same people who are talking about the Kriegler report. And what was the idea? Is to precipitate a crisis. Wafula Chebukati said they came to office 7 months before elections. And so really, to be honest, it was a very short time even for them. So you create confusion and you benefit from that confusion. You create confusion so much and ensure even that very commission, you have over 200 cases in the courts as to destabilize and to make sure that people are not prepared. And the most experienced officer, you start saying you remove him through the same maandamano, now that we have been told they are going to be happening on Mondays and Fridays. I want to say this. There is no substitute for a human being. There is no machine that is better than a human being. If I tick a ballot and it is stored somewhere, that ballot is physically available. You know, our friends are very good with propaganda. They lie no, let me finish. I gave you a time.
I'll request
That's why I'm interjecting.
No, what I'm trying to, let me finish. I did not interrupt. Can I also be allowed to execute my point? Because the best thing that these people do is to allow people not to have a free flow of thought. Our competitors are very good. They lie with their mouth open, with their eyes open. And they precipitate narratives such that, Mike, the benefit of proof is not on the accuser. It simply moves because Baba has said, because so-and-so has said. And they perpetuate that narrative. They keep on repeating it time and again. Can they actually prove to us? They prove to us that actually results were being altered and from where and how. They were even told to show us how the servers were hacked. They gave us some fake SQL thing. And yet, interestingly, the Supreme Court shifted the burden of proof from one Raila Odinga, the petitioner, to the IEBC. Even when IEBC complied with over 90% of the court order. Because it was a ego trip. So ideally, when we in Jubilee talk about a conspiracy, we want to seal all the loopholes that provide the conspiracies that are well premeditated, or people who are not even campaigning, or people who are remaining in press conferences, anticipating to bangle our victory by not doing what the law requires, so that they can come and say that the election was stolen.
All right.
I think
I need you to respond very quickly because I want to take 2 calls.
No, before that, I think one of the rules of debate is, and I'm hoping this is a very good intellectual discussion. When you ask a question, the question should be answered. What Senator Mwaura is saying is evading from the questions you're asking to confuse us, not to discuss the critical issues on the aspect of why are we going back to manual. Instead of answering the questions, why Jubilee is bringing this amendment, what is the motive? He's going away and you're letting him go, which is very wrong. He should answer the question, what was the motive behind these amendments by Jubilee? The rule of thumb is you cannot change the rule of the game halfway. He's not answering. Instead, he's meandering and going back and saying, Baba has said. That is wrong.
Okay.
And you must reprimand him for that.
All right. Allow me to pick 2 calls, then I'll come back to you. And I have a call from Michael in Kibra. Good morning, Michael, to your question or comment.
Yeah, good morning.
Yes, go right ahead.
Yeah, I'm Michael from Kibra.
Yes?
In fact, I'm surprised the way Mheshimiwa is talking. Why Jubilee is just running to election laws, to change election laws, if they sincerely won election? Second, legalities and illegalities. So it seems those numbers which they were saying they won. Irregularities and illegalities, if you plus them, it becomes nothing. Those numbers, we can't accept them. You steal, then you get that numbers. Third one, it seems that we are heading in a bad state. Why are these people changing election laws at this time? If they really squarely won, if they won, still they will win. They are supporters on the ground. I think they lost this election. That's why they are, so that they can steal again and again. To if we go to Supreme Court, then those judges, they cannot have any power to nullify those elections.
All right, Michael, I think we've got your point. Let's move on to Martha in Kisumu. Good morning, Martha.
Good morning.
Yes, go right ahead.
Yeah, I would like to make a few comments. First of all, I am a bit confused because Jubilee seems to have a problem with NASA. And yet, what the court ruled was that IEBC was responsible for bungling the elections. Why would Jubilee want to blame somebody else and not the person who was responsible for bungling the elections? Why is this always NASA, and yet it is IEBC that was found culpable? Secondly, we clearly know the history of this country. The reason why we have the current electoral laws is so that our elections are foolproof. Why does Jubilee want to take us to a situation where there will be no way of verifying whether votes are stolen or whether votes are stuffed or whether, I don't know, who changed the results on the way as taking it to the tallying center? Thirdly, honesty, and I want to tell Mwaura one thing. We are in Kenya of 2017. We are not in Kenya of 1990s. Kenyans are watching the way you people are behaving. And you people are assuming that your side of the divide will always have the numbers. And I want to tell you, things change. And these things you are doing will come back to haunt you. They will come back to hurt you because whoever will be in power will use them, and it is you people who will have created that situation. Thirdly, I want to tell you one thing. Please, stop undermining the intelligence of Kenyans. We are seeing what is happening.
All right, thank you, Martha. Let's move on to another call before we come back to the panel. Ruben in Nyandarua, good morning, and to your comment or question, Ruben.
Yes, morning to you.
Morning.
Yes, first of all, I'm disappointed because your reporter, Patrick, appeared somehow biased, but you look at that. Now, back to the session. Actually, voting is about knowing the will of the people. And it should not be made as complex as it is appearing to be. When we woke up to vote, we didn't know about the Forms 34A, the Forms 34B, or even C. It was as simple as we want our decision to be known, who our leaders we want them to be. And in this scenario now, it is appearing now that like the game is shifting from the common monarchy, knowing the will of the person, to a complex matter whereby the legal minds now have hijacked the whole system. And we are saying this, especially when I hear about the Jubilee amendments, it is as simple as this. We want to be identified. We want the voter to be identified. Some of the I went to the polling station, and you could see clearly that some of the people could not be identified through the BVR system. And this is where we are saying, if at all I cannot be identified through the BVR system, or is it not that I cannot be identified through a manual system? Because I should not be denied the chance or the right to vote. Then, when we talk about the transmission, really we need to be honest with ourselves. We are saying that there are about 10,000 polling stations which are not covered with 3G or 4G network. So what will happen to those areas? If we do not have a complementary system, it means that we are going to vote again on 26th, and the Supreme Court is already knowing the outcome. They will tell us it has been announced again. I want to conclude by saying this. Please, as the big mates are fighting up there, we, the common Mwananchi, are hurting down here. There is no money. The economy has gone flatly down. And you people up there, they are well remunerated through our taxes. You are milking us too penny-free. Please consider this as we move on. Thank you, and peace to our country.
Thank you very much, Ruben from Nyandarua. And I'll now come back to the panel, and quite a lot of issues raised there. But let me just try and consolidate this and bring it back to where we can have a good and an objective discussion. The truth of the matter is our problem may not lie on whether it is manual or electronic. Our biggest problem, I believe, is trust. The fact that trust has been eroded between the two divides and between Kenyans and between NASA and Jubilee. Let me start with you, Honorable Chris Wamalwa. How are we going to resolve this? Because whether it is electronic, whether it is manual, the biggest issue that we have is whether NASA trusts Jubilee, whether Jubilee trusts NASA.
Now, trust is not something, it's earned with time.
Correct.
And of course, Jubilee has, it's been proven they are not trusted. And I want to put these facts on the table. Because when we were in the 11th Parliament, the Kiraitu Orengo legislation was agreed upon. We agreed upon, in fact, we were told, no comma, no full stop should be removed or added. That went. Then afterwards, the leader of majority, through the back door, came and reintroduced that section 44A, which brings in the aspect of complementary. And by that time, of course, they had the majority of the tyranny of numbers. So really, they managed to sneak it through. So that tells you, this is not a brother you can trust. You know, trust, you agree, you must be honest, and implement whatever you've agreed upon. So our brothers the other side, they're not trustworthy. The Supreme Court ruled that these elections were marred with illegalities and irregularities. And the directive was that they repeat the presidential elections and they must adhere to the law. And they say this, in case you don't adhere to the law, we are still here. And looking at the Constitution, I think it's Article 140, yeah? If the petition, the Supreme Court is there to listen to another petition in case they not adhere to the law. And Maraga is still there. And now what Jubilee is trying to do is trying to change the rules of the game halfway. And that's why they want to amend this law, because they have the tyranny of numbers for their own conflicts of interest, for their own selfish interest. So this is not a brother you can trust from the word go. And that's why we ran to the court to help us. Maybe it's only the courts that have unlimited jurisdiction. But in this case, the same Jubilee people are threatening the judiciary. They are threatening the courts. You've seen they want to change the law. You've seen they want to affect the powers of the Supreme Court. And this cannot be just done by Parliament. In case of anything, it must go through a referendum.
Okay.
But because of the numbers, so this is not a brother you can trust. And that's what I said. This is a country for all of us. Let the will of the people be done. They've been saying all over that the sovereignty of the people. The sovereignty of the people, the will of the people, if you do not manipulate those results. Up to now, the results that were being shown on TV, they say those were not the results, that was the data. So if somebody comes and say we got these numbers, we wonder where you got those statistics from.
All right, let me come to you, Honorable Maura, and Honorable Chris Wamalwa is basically blaming Jubilee for the lack of trust. And this is based on the fact that even as we sit, the amendments are looked at from a very suspicious angle, given that there was the Kiraitu Orengo agreement, which was a step in the right direction and a step forward, because this was an agreement between two warring parties. But now, because of the numbers, Jubilee wants to overturn this and take us back to where we are. What are your comments to that on Jubilee being blamed for bringing this mistrust?
You know, when you have one Chris Wamalwa also arrogating himself the power of reprimanding people.
I'll request that we stick to
the
question.
Can I also be given a chance to express myself?
Yes, you can express yourself, but I would want us to stick to that.
Within the context.
I have also to respond to everything that I also am told to respond to. So you cannot tell me that I will not respond to him. He is a panelist like me. The point is, you cannot come and arrogate yourself the responsibility of reprimanding people. The same, attitude of bullying institutions, or bullying your way around, is what I'm also witnessing here. That attitude of condescension, of entitlement to parity and transparency and trust, I want to dismiss it with the contempt it deserves. Because even us in Jubilee have actually realized that there is collusion between the judicial officers and these friends of ours, who will misinterpret the law according to predetermined political outcomes. And you ask me why. How do you tell me a ruling of 4 people, they use their numbers, yet they tell us numbers don't count? A ruling of 4 people who tell us there's ambiguity in law, and yet they don't even follow jurisprudence or well set out principles. And the silent majority in Jubilee, Mike, are aggrieved. We are here on national television, and someone is trying to tell us that we are changing the rules of the game. The power to legislate is the singular role of Parliament. It is not domiciled in the judiciary. And what we are seeing is a situation even where the judiciary is trying to usurp the powers of Parliament. And when that is done, Chris can come and tell us here that they have unlimited jurisdiction. There is nowhere, even in our constitution, does not anticipate where the courts are superior or the judiciary is more superior than the other 2 arms of government. We saw even Maraga calling a press conference to castigate demonstrators and accusing Parliament and the executive. That is the inherent bias that we are also mistrusting, Mike. And trust is not like because NASA is not trusting Jubilee, so they are more right than the others. We have seen the mischief that the laws are being used to circumvent the will of the majority. And we cannot sit back and look. There are no timelines up to when you are supposed to change laws. Just like they have their so-called, rather funny term, irreducible minimums. We also have our way to go. And indeed, with the intimidation of IEBC officials, where people, even the court was being told by the same people to actually, come out clean and redeem themselves, where you have situations of innocent Kenyans, when they themselves have gone to court to ask that they be charged, they are also leading demonstrations to eject them forcefully from office without following the due process as established in Article 99 of the Constitution, Mike. We have to do what is needful to be done. We cannot, and this is on record, we cannot allow anarchists, people who want to precipitate a crisis, people who want to get into power through unconstitutional means, to have their way simply because they will complain that the rules were changed. They are the same people who did not follow the Curricular Commission as to change the commissioners 24 months before elections. So we must also, this is a game, my friend. We must play together. You cannot just say, because now you are the only ones to play, now we should sit back and clap at you. We don't do that, my brother. We will not.
People fail exams, not because they're stupid or foolish, but because they don't follow the instructions. You simply ask a simple question. And with due respect to Senator Mwaura, stick to the question and answer. He has not answered your question. Instead, he's trying to bring in some new dimension of the discussion. But I want to say this. We have the 3 arms of government. We have the judiciary, legislature, and executive. All these 3 arms of government, in line with the Constitution, they have checks and balances. For instance, now, when we pass a law, Parliament is there to make laws, to enact laws. Judiciary is there to interpret laws. If Parliament has passed a law which is not constitutional, it will be declared null and void by the judiciary or the courts. Then we have to come back and amend that law in line with the Constitution or in line with the direction of the court. The executive, executive is also there, but executive in a way, it also checks Parliament. For instance, you can pass a bill and the president can refuse to assent. That is Article 115 of the Constitution. So there's a way of the checks and balances. So no one has come here to say that this arm of government is higher than this. But when it comes to matters of dispute, the court has unlimited jurisdiction. Article 140 of the Constitution is very clear in terms of the presidential petitions. It is under the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court will look at the issue based on the evidence that you've given. They make the judgment. And as they make their judgment, is to declare the results whether invalid. And it's outlined in the Constitution. And this is what the Supreme Court did. And he told us, go back, IBC, repeat these elections. But you must adhere to the law. The law which was already set. Not again after you've realized your deficiencies, you come again, you want to amend the law. And the risk in amending the Elections Act, you know, once the law has been amended, IBC should be able to come up with some regulations to operationalize that statute. And that's where the difficulty is. But that's why we are finding it sinister when you see our brothers from Jubilee side, they want to amend this Elections Act now, that because they have the numbers. This is an abuse of the terrain of numbers.
All right, I'll go back to what I brought in first because neither of you have addressed it, and that's the issue of trust. And I'll approach it from a different angle. The reason why we have all these institutions in place is purely to settle dispute when it comes in, or also to have a fair arbiter. For instance, the IEBC is an institute that is a commission that has been put there constitutionally to be independent. But the IEBC, you'll agree with me, Honorable Chris, that they have not had a chance to breathe because they have been in and out of court before the elections. We are still on IEBC. When it comes to the judiciary, when they ruled against the petitioner in 2013, they did a good job. NASA said that they need to redeem themselves. Now that they have ruled in NASA's favor, NASA is very happy about it. Jubilee is not happy about it. And this is where now we end up as a country that cannot have the way forward, because our institutions are meant to be independent, but you politicians will not allow them to be independent. Honorable Mwaura, which institution do we have in Kenya that is independent? If it's the EACC, it has a barrage of attacks. If it's the IEBC, same thing. When it comes to the judiciary, same thing, depending, again, on which side they rule.
You know, that is very interesting because I saw EACC has written to the judiciary telling them that they would want to interrogate the registrar of the Supreme Court. And Anna Madi, who we have been with in civil society, wrote back to say that they need to get a court order from the same Supreme Court so that they can investigate. You know, that is actually the hypocrisy of the highest order. Institutions that are independent, the Chapter 15 institutions, have a right even to investigate members of parliament. The institutions, you saw Apollo Mbaya going to court to suspend the privileges of members of parliament within the precincts of parliament, and that was suspended. So we are having a rogue judiciary, and we must call it for what it is.
Now, has it become rogue because it has ruled for the petition?
Consequently, you remember even before where we had a court making a ruling based on evidence as newspaper cuttings. Huh? I mean, how comes, you know, it has come to my consternation that you can almost predict the judgment of a given judge based on their profile, personal profile. Mike, you want to tell me that you can trust such a process? And you know, they even say very well that everybody has a price. So there's nowhere. That independent arbitration seems to be lacking, I must confess. That we don't have individuals who can objectively superintend of a matter with Solomonic wisdom. That is something that is really a challenge that we Kenyans must address.
Okay.
Because, you know, institutions are actually, the integrity of institutions, Mike, depends on the individuals behind those
They're
institutions.
run by human beings.
Exactly.
All right.
And just
allow me to pause you because we need to take a break, but we are going to come back and allow you to finish that thought. It's now 3 minutes to 8. We need to release KTN Home for where now the life and style begins. But right here on KTN News, we continue with this conversation and put our pulse on the state of the nation. So do stay with us. I'll be reading through your comments when we come back, so don't go away. Those of us on KTN Home, switch over to KTN News if you want to continue the conversation. Otherwise, KTN Home, goodbye.